having arrived at this state through a regenerative process which was well underway in the early 1800s when Jeremiah Lyons married Ellen Whalen and begat William Lyons, who married Catherine Crossgrove, who begat another William Lyons, who married Mary Donahoe, who begat me. Welcome to the great 1986 family reunion, and an auspicious occasion it is indeed. Welcome grandmothers, grandfathers, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, cousins, nieces and nephews, grandchildren, and all permutations thereof. Welcome descendants of those who came from the verdant, beautiful, but troubled hills, valleys, and shores of the island of Ireland. Before we proceed with the more irreverent parts of this program, I ask that you join me in a brief prayer to acknowledge the spiritual presence with us today. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
We also acknowledge the spiritual presence of the many loved ones who have gone before us, many of whom who started the traditions of these family reunions. We further recall the mellifluous names of the first families associated with the Lyons family: Whalen, Harrington, Kane, Donaldson, Coffey, Crossgrove, Finley, Coughlin, McDowell, Ryan, Maloney, and O'Donnell. As I recalled the troubles of Ireland, I remembered the story of my grandmother, Catherine Crossgrove Lyons, who depicted the major trouble that existed in Ireland due to the cruel occupation of the islands by the British for 800 years. An Irishman went to confession, and he said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I have just shot and killed an Englishman." The priest said, "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, my good man, this is a confessional. It's no place to brag." And as history went forward in Ireland, I'm further reminded of what a mixed emotion was in the 1930s as the Republic of Ireland finally worked its way to full independence. It is the sight of a British military personnel carrier going over a cliff with one unoccupied seat. The Irish were denied their right to be educated, for the British were secure in their belief that God was an Englishman, and they reserved that privilege for themselves. The Irish did, however, educate themselves to an extent with a system of schools out in the open called hedgerow schools. Although it did dispel some illiteracy, the meager education was supplemented with storytelling, which became a national trait. The stories were often clever, ingenious, and humorous. For instance, an Irishman was crossing over to Ulster in Northern Ireland, where they believed in customs, liquor tax, and such like. The woman told the customs official that the only thing she had to declare was her faith in God and her love of the Virgin Mary. Examination by the customs official revealed, however, she had a large bottle under her shawl. The customs official said, "What's in there?" "Holy water," she replied. As he sniffed the bottle, and with growing appreciation, he said, "Holy water indeed. That's the finest example of Irish whiskey ever made by Hennessy." She responded, "Holy water in the whiskey. It's nothing but a miracle that you witnessed and confirmed with your very own nose." The official appreciated good entertainment, so he allowed her to proceed, praising the saints, clutching the bottle and maintaining her contempt for British officialdom. As I made the long drive here, I stopped in a rural pub. A local fellow found I was going to an Irish reunion. He asked what the greatest invention was from Ireland. He asked if I knew that. With the knowledge that St. Brendan had sailed from Ireland to America 600 years ahead of the first Vikings, and that the monks of Ireland had kept the lights of intellectual achievement lit during the dark ages of Europe, I assumed that he would convey some equally obscure and arcane lore. He said the greatest invention of Ireland was a wheelbarrow because it taught them to walk on their hind legs. I think the bloody fellow was British. The bartender then bragged dutifully that the streets of their town had no crimes. On the way out, I observed that the town had no streets. I think this fellow was Norwegian. My responsibility today is similar to that of a corpse at an Irish wake. I'm expected to be here, but I am not expected to significantly participate in the affairs. We have a program today including distinguished speakers, many of whom have kissed the Blarney Stone, which has given them world-class agilities of the jaws. The speakers are roughly categorized into Old Guard, Current Guard, and New Guard. As I think of the Old Guard, I'm reminded that several weeks ago I was asked to MC a retirement party for our company, and it was stated that you didn't need to be an antique collector to be able to sit on something over 50 years old. I have not overly organized this affair, and I hope that the people that I have in mind speaking are indeed going to speak. And the first one of the Old Guard is my cousin, Bob Lyons of Wagner. Bob, are you still going to be on our agenda? And assuming that you are, I would like to observe that Bob is one of the most affable and good-natured people I have known. In fact, I have heard that he even smiles when he has his jaws x-rayed. Bob, could we hear from you, please?
Well, I certainly appreciate your introduction, but I must correct you on one little item. I'm not your cousin. Well, I'm Bob Lyons, that's for sure.
Could I explain? I planted that in there to see if you were paying attention.
Thank you very much. I was. That is right, I am Bob Lyons. And I am the youngest child of William and Catherine Lyons. That would be my father and mother. I'm also the youngest member of, as he calls it, the Old Guard. And that is true. I'm the youngest of all the cousins, of which there are 4 left. Margaret Coughlin Weiland in Sioux Falls, who's been indisposed for many years. And then the Queen of the Ball, Florence Cobalt of Sioux Falls. And then the dancing lady, my sister Mary. Who is 80 plus. That's close enough, I believe. And then I came along the last, and I'm here. Well, I just would like to go back. Those here that will go much farther back than I will, but I will start with my parents. My father was William Lyons, and he was the youngest of his family. He was born in Chicago and lived there for till a boy, large boy, I presume. And they emigrated out to Iowa, and he grew to manhood there. And at about approximately the age of 22, he migrated to South Dakota, up north of Madison, where he had older brothers there. And he went into kind of partnership with them and worked with them, and a large farming operation. And what I mean large, it was large because they had many horses, and he was a horse lover. But they had many hired men too, and there he acquired a nickname, which went with him till he died, and is still, some of his old men call it, the boss. And that was his nickname. And then eventually, a lady came out from Wisconsin, a young lady, to teach school, and she eventually became my mother, with Catherine Cosgrove. And I was interviewed here recently for a tape. One of the questions was asked, did I know anything about my parents' romance? And the only thing I could really remember being told was a sleigh ride they took at one time. And my father was driving the team, and a bunch of these younger people were in the back of the sled. So he asked the fellow next to him if he would drive. He said, I think I should get in the back of the sled and watch that none of these young people fall out. But that was that. And in 1887, why, they were married, and in the Bible there we have a record of their marriage. And they lived north of Madison for many years, and if my mind is clear, there were 8 children born there. And then they eventually migrated down to Wagner, South Dakota, in Charles Mix County. And they lived on some different places down there, renting farms and stuff. And eventually they bought 4/40 of Indian land, which made a square quarter section for $10 an acre, which would be $1,600. And as time went on, and it came out now that one of those 40s was an Indian allotment that was fictitious. It was a child that was never born. And that is still in litigation. And I am a bit familiar with that because I have 2 40s of Indian land in litigation, and we cannot get a clear title to it. And that's something that's been brought up and bashed out. It cost $20 million to get going, but they're trying to take the land away from us. But it's not without a hard blood, I'm sure. But anyway, as time went on, and he finally paid for that land, and as farmers have done today. He's expanded. He did expand and bought other land and remortgaged the land. And 30 years later, from the day he bought it, he lost it to the federal land bank for $1,600 that he paid for 30 years before that. But at that time, there was nobody came out and said they would try to do something, the government to save it or something. They just come out and said, well, Joe, if you can't make the payments, we take the land, and that's what happened. And they lost their home. And I am sure that that was as big a heartache to them as it is today to the people that are losing their farms. After that, in 1936, when they lost that, then they moved to live with my sister Mary and her husband Vincent Robinson, and they lived with them until they died. And were buried there at Wagner. But along the line, there were many tragedies and heartaches fell, and before they moved down from Lake County, north of Madison, one of the little children, Johnny, somehow called up and got a bottle of carbolic acid and drank it. And they were 13 miles from town, and the only form of transportation or communication they had would have been with horses, so you know there was nothing they could do. The mother held Johnny in her arms until he died, and he's buried up to the Deuce Church. And then again, after they moved down and they lived on a rented farm, and as we knew it, was the Wise place, and some of you, younger people, will know it as the Battle Air Farm. Tragedy struck again. They contacted scarlet fever and were quarantined, and even people made a wide circle when they went by the gate. And in 1904, that was, and Catherine died.